Well, hello. Welcome once again
No,
to, to Pale Balloons and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Pete York is an English drummer and original member of the Spencer Davis Group. Pete, along with Spencer Davis, guitar and vocals, Steve Winwood, vocals, keyboards, guitar, and Muff Winwood on bass, formed the band in 1963 in Birmingham. Pete stayed in the band until 1968. Steve left in 1967 to form the band Traffic. Later, Spencer would revive the band and continue under different lineups until his passing in 2020. When Pete and pianist Eddie Hardin left the band in 1968, they formed Hardin York and recorded 4 albums from 1969 to 1974. Later, the duo would reform and record a few live albums. Over the years, Pete has fronted several of his own bands, including an all-star band called Olympic Rock Blues Circus. In 1987, Pete started his Superdrumming TV series, which became quite popular during the late 80s and early 90s. Starting in the new millennium, Pete has played drums for German jazz musician Helge Schneider, and he has taken part in the Drum Legends project with Scorpions drummer Herman Rarebell. Mr. York has lived in Germany since 1984. Well, welcome, Pete.
thank you very much. That was all correct. Well done. You've done your homework. That's great.
That's good. It's always good to be correct and not have a lot of corrections.
Yeah.
Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Middlesbrough in northeast England, on the coast, about 100 miles south of Scotland.
Oh, all right.
On that east coast, which
was
actually a nice place to live. It had obviously had beaches because of the sea was right there, but the sea was unfortunately never very warm, the North Sea. So if we wanted to go swimming in it, we had to be brave lads. Yeah.
Even in the summertime, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Even in the summertime, it was cold. Yeah, yeah. But it was a lovely place to be. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it. Well, early on, do you remember hearing music being played in the household at all?
Yes, we only had, I mean, bearing in mind that would be about I would be 8 years old in 1950. And the entertainment that we had in the house, much different to today, was just a radio set.
Yeah.
You know, just radio. No, we didn't have TV. TV was just coming in then. Yeah. And I didn't have a record player, but as I got a little bit older, sort of becoming a teenager, I got what we used to call a wind-up gramophone. You know, that's a clockwork mechanism with the needle on it, and the loudspeaker was built into the tone arm, really. Yeah. So that was those record players, and then a little while after that, of course, along came the electric record player, which was, of course, far more efficient, and that was good. That was good for if you wanted to get the chaps and the girlfriends round and do a little rock and roll dancing. Then the electric gramophones were better. They were louder for a start. Yeah.
Yeah. You remember one of your first singles or albums that you got?
Yes, I do. It was called the Bad Penny Blues. It was actually a blues, and it was played by a trumpet player from England called Humphrey Littleton. It was actually sort of a jazzy boogie record. The piano player on it, Johnny Parker, was a very good boogie player, as well as being a good jazz player. So that hit for Humph really was the start of my getting interested in the swinging music. And then when my mother caught on to the fact that I liked that kind of music, she knew a little bit more about it all, and she steered me in the right direction, which in our case was listening to the Benny Goodman Band with Gene Krupa on the drums. And of course, Gene Krupa was a spectacular drummer, a very good player, and he caught my imagination immediately, and it wasn't long before I saw a film with him in it. He had film star, sorry about my voice, film star looks,
Yeah.
and he really was a star, in the movies which he appeared, and I thought this was marvelous, and it looked great the way he played, and the drums, of course, had this magic that most drum sets in those days, that the finish on them was called white marine pearl, which was like a white pearl with a slight touch of blue in it, which was gorgeous. And you see that on old photographs. Nearly all the drummers had that. That was the finish that they had. They didn't have any other colours, whatever. But the drums looked great, the cymbals looked great, all polished and shining. It really caught my imagination completely. Yeah. And
Well,
I didn't know what was involved in playing the drums, or what was the first thing you had to learn. I had no idea about that, but I just knew that I wanted to try it. So I started to make up, and this would be, I was about 8 years old, 1950, and I started to make up a little drum set with cooking pots from the kitchen, and,
yeah.
a tin, a tin which had contained Smith's crisps,
Okay, good, yeah.
and that, and then I had a little cymbal, just a small one, it wasn't really big at all, and but I also got some brushes, drum brushes, so I started to play with the brushes, which my parents were very happy about because they were much quieter.
Quieter.
Playing with sticks.
Right. Right.
So they went for that. Yeah.
They didn't have
we like that one you do with the brushes. Why don't you do that for the next hour?
Yeah, more brushes.
Yeah, more brushes. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I've heard stories, about parents and how they hated for their kids to learn drums.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, when you start and you have no idea what you're doing, there are moments where you just break free and play anything, which doesn't make any sense at that point. It's only later you realize that whatever you're going to be playing needs to make some sort of sense. Because you're playing, this is another big lesson you learn early on, that you never forget that you're playing for the listener.
Yeah.
I mean, some jazz anoraks they might say, yeah, but if you're going to be a true artist, you can't just think about the public all the time. And I suppose that's true to an extent. But I've always believed in the idea of show business and entertaining actually people. And I'm not afraid to say that, because one of my bigger idols and one of the greatest musicians there has been in our music was Louis Armstrong.
Right.
And Louis Armstrong always maintained you've got to play for the people, play something that people can relate to. So I've never forgotten that. Many lessons I've learned over the years from my peers, so to speak, the people who were much more experienced than I was, who were much better than I was, actually. And I've learned from them, and I pick things up. I'm kind of an anorak in terms. That means a geek coat.
We're going to get a lot of mileage out of that word.
Yeah, I think we will. Yeah. I love so many of the old stars. People who came before me, and I hang on their every word because I'm interested to know what kind of people they were, and and how they behaved, and what their attitude to the public was, and what their attitude to each other was. And I find that very interesting. So that's film stars, writers, generally people who do artistic things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, a couple of things. mentioning Humphrey Littleton.
Yeah.
Believe
So you haven't heard of him, have you?
yes, and I believe
Really?
I recently talked with Jim McCarty, and I believe he mentioned Humphrey. I believe in our talk, I believe he brought up.
I'm sure he would. Humphrey
Yeah,
was a wonderful man. He was a few years older than all of us, than Jim and myself. But he was really good. He was a very good band leader. The people who played in his band all loved him, which is not always the case, I can assure you.
true,
The guys in the band, some band leaders, they really hate them.
very,
So,
very true.
bad
And the,
guy.
and the other thing was the Gene Krupa. You were fortunate enough to do years later the tribute.
Yes, I
Be a
did.
part of that, and I know that was very special for you.
It was actually special to me. We couldn't do it with a big band. It would just have been too expensive. But we did it with an 8-piece band. And a girl singer, we had a girl singer in it. Of course, Krupa had a few hits in his day where there was female vocalists, like Anita O'Day was one of his vocalists.
Right.
But I did some research when I was doing that Gene Krupa thing, because I wanted to get the background right. And I was told by people who knew him personally about him and what he was really a very nice guy and very helpful to young drummers. And it really he was okay. I think I certainly would have enjoyed taking him out for dinner.
Right. That would have been nice. Yes.
Yeah, oh, it certainly would.
He
Yeah.
would have appreciated that. Early on, who were some bands and musicians that were influential in your life? Heading into popular music when you started before you started playing. Who were some?
Okay. Well, I liked the big bands very much. I liked Count Basie. And when I was in my school years, my mother and I, she was a fan also of this music, big band music. She took me to concerts when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. And we saw the Count Basie band live, which was wonderful. But also we saw Duke Ellington, who became another favourite. And a little bit later still, I did see Louis Armstrong in person. Now, I remember that rock hadn't made too much of an impact at that point. And rock and roll, pop type rock and roll, if you see what I mean, that didn't really interest me very much because it was a bit too simple.
Okay.
It was very
Three chord.
actually very easy to play. I could play those rhythms. I tried to play those rhythms, which were I could do that quite quickly, and I think I could teach anybody within a short time. Anybody who'd never even touched a drum set, I could teach them to play the basic rock and roll rhythm, which fits with every rock and roll song you can play pretty well. But the good people have that extra something special. And the good people who I was able to hear on my record player and everything else was, for example, Little Richard. Little Richard was a great rock and roller. And I played quite early on in my life. I played on a show with Jerry Lee Lewis and Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps. We played a concert in Birmingham. But Jerry Lee actually didn't like us from the beginning because we were on the show with him. And we got tremendous applause when we came on because it was our hometown. And the kids, they loved us anyway. So when we came on, it was, big cheers. Spencer Davis, Stevie, of course, was very popular. And so that was that. And Jerry Lee didn't really like us. I was feeling backstage and everything.
He didn't like being upstage.
Because we got more applause than he did.
Yeah.
Terrible, which is terrible.
Was your hometown?
Anyway.
What was the first band that you were in? Were you in a band before Spencer Davis?
Yes, I was. I played with the Birmingham. I wasn't at the university, but I knew all the musicians there, and they asked me to play in their university jazz band. In fact, I played in two bands at the university. One was a Dixieland swing band, playing repertoire, shall we say, quite a lot of blues mixed up in that. And then there was also another band where by then the popular people on the jazz scene were people like Cannonball Adderley.
Yes.
Adderley, Dave Brubeck was very popular. You know, there was a whole raft of people. And they all came on concert tours. So we had the luck where we could actually see them all. So I saw a lot of these people live. I didn't meet any of them except one night. I remember Duke Ellington came to Birmingham, and all of us boys, we were about 18 or 19 then, we all went round to the stage door like groupies to see our idols. And sure enough, at the end of the concert, after a while, when they would have been changing their clothes, they all came out and got into the bus. They had a big luxury bus, and they climbed into the bus. And we all got a chance to sort of wave at them and say, yeah, lovely. Just fans, you know. But it was a great adventure. And oh, that's right, how that evening ended up. They got on the bus and drove away, and they were going to go to the hotel in Birmingham, where the band was staying overnight. And one of the band didn't make it. He was a trumpet player from Sweden who had been in the band a short time, and his name was Rolf Eriksson. And he came out the door after all the others had left. And he was looking around and everything. And he said to us, I don't know where we're staying with the band. I don't know what the hotel is. I've never been in Birmingham in my life before. Can you help me? So we said very wisely, well, of course, we know where you're staying. You know, we're real groupies. So he said, oh, can you take me there? Yeah. So we walked through the rainy streets of Birmingham and arrived at the hotel. All the rest of the band were there, sitting in the cocktail bar of the hotel, obviously, as musicians do at the end of their gigs. So he said, would you like to come in and have a drink with us? I mean, what a wonderful invitation. So we did, and sat there surrounded by all these legends. It was magic, just great. Yeah, that's a night on it.
I like those kind of stories. Well, what jazz group were you in that was featured on TV in 1962?
Yes, that was the evening news, the BBC Evening News, which came on about 6 o'clock in the evening, and we got onto that because we won a competition for being the best university jazz band in that particular year.
Okay.
So we had been taking part in rounds of competition concerts, and then we won. We got the big prize, and we were invited down to London to the Fairfield Halls in Croydon, which I'm sure many Americans will know, and there we were, and you know, and we won the prize for the night, which was great. So the next night, they had us on the BBC Evening News, that was my first TV show. Not playing the Spencer, but playing jazz. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's something.
Yeah.
Always remember that first time too. Well,
yeah.
Tell us how Spencer Davis Group formed, how the band came together.
Well, that was at Birmingham University, and once again, it wasn't that we were all at university. Spencer was the only one at the university. The Winwood brothers, Steve and Muff, they weren't. Steve was still at school, and Muff had left school by then and started in a job working for in his father's company. And I was working in Birmingham. That's why I'd arrived in Birmingham. Anyway, I had a job working in a, don't laugh, screw factory. It made screws for the car industry, and millions of screws were turned out, and nuts and bolts, all things to do with fastening things together in cars and in many other things. And there were 5,000 people working in the factory where I was, and I was working in an office, learning how to do all the office stuff in a big company like that. But also, I learned some practical things about operating an industrial lathe, which we use to make various things, and that was quite good. I quite enjoyed that. The working with machinery was good, except that the noise in the halls where they would have 100 or 200 of these machines, and there were more halls, not just one. There were maybe 10 halls like this, and there were all these workers in there, and it was funny because the workers had got into the habit of not being able to hear each other.
Right.
So they used to speak in a way where they mouthed everything. I'm doing it now.
Yeah, you had to be a good lip reader. Yeah.
Yeah, so you had to be a lip reader to get through that. So that's something else I learned, how to be a lip reader. But while I was there, I'd got a sort of rudimentary drum set. Wasn't anything terribly glamorous, but it was good enough for me as I was starting. And I was playing, and I played it every moment I had, really. I used to take that drum set, the part of the drum set, not all of it. I used to take it to work with me on the bus. I didn't have a car then. And there was a place in the factory where I could get the drums out and play on them in my lunchtime when I had a break. And I could play on these drums and practice. And of course, with all this racket going on around me,
They couldn't hear you.
It was wonderful. It was a perfect place to practice.
Perfect. Ideal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and while I was there, I started doing club gigs.
Okay.
Also with Spencer Davis, because he was singing with the Dixieland band at the university. He sang jazz songs. He sang Careless Love and old blues like that, And he also sang a song called "I Wish I Could Shimmy Like My Sister Kate."
Oh, I've heard of it. I haven't heard the song, but I've heard, of it. Yeah.
I'm sure you heard those things. So we were just big fans of all that sort of music, and then the rock and roll thing began to come in more and more, and we were listening more and more to it. And then Spencer Davis himself, we already met the Winwood brothers, so we knew them and we knew of them, and we knew that Steve had an extraordinary talent for music. He was far and away ahead of the rest of us. When he took up the guitar, which he did in my teenage years, so to speak, he became, I have to say this, he became a better guitarist than Spencer Davis in the space of about 2 months. Yeah. He was amazing, and still is.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned playing some live shows and gigs. Any shows that stand out in your mind?
Live show.
Yeah, the live shows.
Yes, there were. Actually, the first live show I played, I say live show because I actually it was like doing a proper show, being a proper musician. I actually got paid for it. And this was a little gig which paid me 15 shillings and a bottle of brown ale. That bottle which I got for free was not the last bottle I drank that night. I did have more. But I do remember that because that's the sort of thing you would remember. The first time I got paid for playing.
Yeah.
And now there are no more shillings anymore.
Right.
So so that was the situation with the first gig, and then there were more gigs like that in Birmingham, and then we began to travel. We travelled up north to Newcastle on Tyne, which was almost the country where I was born in, that northeast country, and and we came down to London to play. And my first gigs in London were small gigs, nothing special, but it wasn't long before because we were getting very popular then. We had a good show, and one has to remember that about this time in London you had the Rolling Stones. In Newcastle you had the Animals, and in Manchester you had Jerry and the Pacemakers was Liverpool, but Manchester had a good rock band. The Hollies were from Manchester.
Right,
actually.
they were.
Yeah. The Hollies.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's Manchester. So they were all rock groups which were coming up, and so were we. We were all on the same circuit. So the Beatles and the Stones were, of course, ahead of everybody in terms of popularity at that point. But we were all pretty close behind. And there was one year, which was 1966, where the Spencer Davis Group won a prize for being the most popular group playing in ballrooms, which is before the rock scene started. Ballrooms had been the place where young people went to dance. In the States, as I found out later, one of my first gigs in the States was in Chicago at the Aragon Ballroom. And another gig I played in Los Angeles was the Avalon Ballroom. And these had been in the swing era, of which I talk about sometime. Those ballrooms were terribly important. That was the center of social activity. When the big bands were in there, and the big bands began to drop off in popularity, so the rock groups came in and began to play the ballroom scene. So the ballroom scene lasted for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a nice place to play. How are the acoustics in the ballroom?
To be very honest with you, I was so happy to be playing, especially when I came on my first tour of America.
Yeah.
Those ballrooms I mentioned to you, they were just legendary to me, because I was my first time in America, and there we are playing in all these places which I knew from the jazz history books.
Right,
But
yeah.
now we're in there playing we always thought we played rhythm and blues. That's what if people said, "What's that music you play?" We always said rhythm and blues.
Mhm.
And so it went on. And things got bigger and better for us. And we the records began to have some action, the singles. And the first single the first single we recorded was called Dimples.
Really, yeah.
And that was written by John Lee Hooker, who was a famous rhythm and blues guy. And that, I don't think that got anywhere in the States. It might have got a bit of interest, but bear in mind, we had sent copies of our first recordings of the first singles. We sent those to record companies in America, hoping they might pick up on them. One of the companies we sent to, which was the company we actually were most interested in, was Atlantic Records. And the boss of Atlantic Records was called Ahmet Ertegun, and he had a brother as well, the Ertegun brothers, and they were good people actually, and so they put out the very first singles. But sorry, no, they didn't put out the singles. That's the whole point. Beg your pardon. The singles came out with another company, but they called back, I remember, after they'd been sent a package of press material about the band. And they sent a message back saying, "We love the music. The music is marvelous, but we can't take you because we're only booking black artists."
Mm.
So that was the switch. And they had on their label, they had Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles. It was crazy, the people they had. But at that time, they weren't, not for very long, did it? But at that time, it was all black artists. So that was, as far as we were concerned, that was a great compliment, because that's what we aspired to be. We aspired to sound like the black artists that we loved on records for the previous 5 or 6 years.
Right.
So
Well,
to have something mistaken for being black.
Yeah. Right. Did you have any stories throughout the career of Spencer Davis where you were mistaken, just hearing the music, mistaken for a black group?
Oh yes,
Did that
oh
happen?
yes. People were often surprised when they saw us, and they were even more surprised when they saw how old Steve was. That he was virtually straight out from being a schoolboy. So yes, people were quite shocked at that. They listened to Steve's voice on the records, and they thought, first of all, well, that must be Spencer Davis. His name is on the band,
Right.
so that must be him. And then they found out two shocks in one night, folks.
Yeah, he has
He's
very
white,
mature, very
and he's
mature.
not. He's not the band leader.
Well, you mentioned the recordings. Any recollections from the actual recording sessions? Any interesting stories there?
Stories on the sessions. Well,
Yeah.
I think one of the things was that we did not waste our time. When we went in the studio, there was always a good engineer in the studio, and sometimes, but not always, somebody who purported to produce us, like Chris Blackwell purported to be the producer, but often he wasn't there. We didn't really need that. If you had a good engineer like Glyn Johns or one of those guys, they virtually did all the producing that was necessary. We knew enough to come in and listen and say this instrument is not high enough, or put a little bit more effect on that, whatever. And so we handled most of that sort of stuff ourselves, really.
You're right. You're right about that. If you have a good engineer, that's what they do. They work the nuts and bolts. And a lot of time as a producer, they just put their name on the recording.
That's right.
They don't do a whole lot. Yeah.
No,
I've heard that story.
Oh yes, I bet you have. It was very, very general. Most of us managed. We knew the sound we wanted to get,
Yeah.
and so it was easy enough. Stories of anything amusing happening, whatever. I don't actually remember any, except when we did "Give Me Some Lovin'." We did have a producer in there who was called Jimmy Miller.
Okay.
And he was from the States. And Jimmy was a great guy, had a lot of good ideas. He was worth having in the studio as a producer. And he brought in this African tom-tom, like a big drum, which you hit it with a big beater with a round end on it. And he did, when we overdubbed all of us playing percussion instruments, and also I played the drums, and Jimmy himself played this African tom-tom with two beaters, one on each end, because what he wanted was the effect of the rhythm in that song goes. Now, for the bomb with the accent on it, we used this African tom-tom. And I always remember Jimmy sitting there, and it was quite hard to play, and the sticks were heavy, and he was beating away on these drums. And I remember him breaking out into a sweat while he was doing it, hammering away on these drums. And but it worked. It was a good effect, and everybody comments now on the rhythm that we had in the band, because Steve's talents sort of were so great that they kind of overshadowed the rest of us. to a certain extent. But I've always believed, and people are catching on to this, that Muff and I, we did make a very good rhythm team. Yeah. And Muff was a fine musician, actually.
Sure.
Yeah, he could write music very well, and he had his own. While we were all in Birmingham, he had a 7-piece band with 4 horns, and as far as I know, he used to write the arrangements for it. So he's writing arrangements for 4 horns, which is not that easy, but he did it very well. And that jazz band that they had then, they had arrangements of some lovely, lovely pieces of music. But Muff arranged a piece of Stan Kenton's music, which was for a big band, and he arranged it down for our little band, and it sounded wonderful. I was very impressed with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys were a very tight unit, and it sounds like there was really good chemistry between all the guys.
There was, actually, yes.
Well, most of us know the hits, Keep On Running, Somebody Help Me, Give Me Some Lovin', and I'm a Man.
Yeah.
Any songs you thought should have been hits, but weren't?
Oh, dear, that's a tough one. Oh, all right, yeah. My wife just chipped in there with Georgia on My Mind.
Oh, right.
We did that, which is an old standard, and Steve loved it, and he used to play it on stage every night on our club gigs, and that does give rise to a little story, because we used to do that in the show every night, and Steve came in one night on the Rolling Stones tour, and we were due to play directly before the Stones on this theatre. We were playing in theatres then. And we came back in, and little did we know, the piano lid was closed on the stage. It was a full house, full public, all sitting out there watching this great show, waiting to see the Stones. And hopefully some of them waited to see us as well. And Mick Jagger came back in with the remains of his fish and chips. He'd been eating a big packet in the newspaper, of English fish and chips. So apparently, without any of us knowing, he opened up the piano and put all these bits of old fish skin and leftover chips and grease into the piano on the keys. So Steve came in, we played a couple of songs with the group, and then he went over to the piano to play Georgia, lifted the piano lid, plonked his hands down on the keyboard, and came up with all this mess from fish and chips.
That was nasty.
People were always playing jokes on each other on those tours, and on the last night especially, it would get quite outrageous, and we'd all be playing jokes on each other all the way through the show. So the public actually got a completely different show than they did on the other nights. That was good fun. The Stones tour was a great tour to be on. We toured with a lot of other Manfred Mann. We toured with The Who, Brenda Lee, of all people, and quite a few other big names. Jerry Lee Lewis, as I say.
Yeah. Well, any interesting stories from the films and the TV shows that the band was in? You guys were in some films, yeah.
Well, we were in one film particularly called The Ghost Goes Gear, and this was a film with a story, and we all did a bit of acting as well as we could. Steve hated the acting, but I loved it. I've always been a ham, and I always liked performing. And I don't know whether Steve ever did. Well, he liked performing music, put it that way, but actually performing in that sort of setting as an actor or even as a comedian, it wasn't his thing at all. But we did, as you say, we did another film which was simply a procession of bands playing a number from the time, And that one was called Ghost Goes Here. That one was called something A Go Go. It was one of those titles.
Yeah, that word was used a lot back then. A go go.
Oh, it was, yes. Disco A Go Go. And we did dozens of television shows. If you had a hit, you'd be invited onto the best shows every week, which of course gave you even more of a hit because it promoted the record even more. So it was a good move on behalf of the producers of the show to bring in bands which were already in the charts and maybe already number one. But then we'd get on the show again. Thank You Lucky Stars was one of the shows. Ready Steady Go was another show.
Yeah.
I have a memory of Ready Steady Go where we used to mime on Ready Steady Go. By then playing live was not done by the groups anymore. But we were going to go on at Ready Steady Go, and we were going to be playing on the same stage, but before him, the same stage as the Dave Clark Five, who had the number one that week. Do you remember the Dave Clark Five?
Yeah.
Heard of them, yeah. And they said to me, "Do you mind doing the playback sitting on Dave's drums?" Because you're miming anyway, you don't have to play. So I said, "Yeah, that's fine." You know, I was used to it. I was used to miming, and I got quite good at it, I think. So I sat up there on Dave's drums, and as I was playing them, I realised that they were set up with the tom-toms on the front, and they were raised up quite a bit. And then there was things down here. The snare drum itself, which is the drum that you play the most in rock music or jazz even, the snare drum was actually down below, hidden behind these tom-toms which were on the front. And I realised that Dave didn't want anybody to see what his hands were doing, because that was what happened with these drums. You saw him sitting there looking very handsome, which he did, but you saw him from the middle of the chest upwards. You didn't see anything further down than that. So you couldn't see what his hands were doing. So you couldn't see that he didn't really know how to play.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I never knew.
Yeah. So next time you watch him on a TV show, like they show you, well, you can find him on YouTube playing. Like when they did the Ed Sullivan show and stuff like that, they would be careful to keep his hands out of view.
Right. So he would probably tell the camera guy, only film me.
Tell the yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yes, sure. And I don't blame him one little bit. He was a very good. Dave was a good manager for the band and organizer, and he did several clever things when that golden 60s was all over for us. In the years later on, he had when it became possible for him to do so, he actually bought up all the tapes of Ready Steady Go.
Right. There you go.
Bought the rights for them.
Right. Jim brought that up too. Yes, he did. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's right. I thought, what a fascination he must have had with that show, I guess. Interesting.
Oh yes, it was interesting. I always liked to. I was always interested in the background of things, so I used to talk to the cameramen and so on. And this made me wise, because in later years, when I was booked on TV shows here in Germany, I used to get very friendly with the cameraman who was nearest to me, because he said, I remember one guy in particular, and he said to me, keep your eye on my camera, and I'll make sure that we get a great shot that the director will pick in the box. So he'll say, "Oh, go to camera 4 on the drums," and they'd come to me. So they cut to me, and I would carefully smile into the camera.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Well, that's good. I mean, you got to know through all this, time who to talk to find the ins and outs and
yes,
right,
that's
right.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Exactly. Very, very good. Very good. Well, while you were still in Spencer Davis Group in 1966, you
Well,
joined Eric Clapton's Powerhouse for a short time.
that's right. Now that was a short-lived thing,
Short-lived thing.
but we
You
made
and
five
you and
tracks.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. You and Steve, and he went
yeah,
by the name Steve Anglo.
that's right, because there were contract difficulties.
Yeah, right.
And Island Records had a group under contract called the Anglos.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's why they picked that name. It sounded pretty cool,
Yeah.
Steve Anglo. It may, in fact, he never told us this, but I remember sometimes some people said they'd been listening to the Anglos record themselves, the record under their name, and they said that's Steve singing in there. Steve's in that.
Yeah.
Now none of us ever knew who the Anglos actually were. It could well have been a group put together by Blackwell to feature Steve, to kind of give him a chance outside of the Spencer Davis group. Could easily have been. But Steve never said anything, and he kept quiet about that.
Well, at that time, could you see the potential Eric had to go on to bigger and better things, Eric Clapton?
Um, yes, I think so, because he used to come round and sit in with us, Eric. When we played the clubs in London, he would always turn up because he loved Steve and he loved playing with Steve. And Steve was sort of on his level of playing.
Uh-huh.
And but when Eric turned up to these club gigs and sat in with us, he always had a little group of hangers-on.
Okay.
Maybe 6 or 8 or 10 people would come with him.
His group.
They travel across London just to find out where Eric was going to sit in next.
Uh-huh.
And then they'd come in and listen to it. And then when Eric left, they left.
Uh-huh.
But it just showed he had a fan club even then, when hardly anybody had sort of fan clubs who followed them around. That was something else. But Eric was good. That whole band was Jack Bruce on the bass, Steve Winwood, as we said, a guy who was a friend of Jack's called Ben Palmer on the piano. If you look in the history books, you can find him. And then Paul Jones, the harmonica player from Manfred Mann.
That's right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you mentioned only a few songs were recorded. That was the idea of American producer Joe Boyd.
Yeah. Joe Boyd produced this. He produced this, the thing we played. We did 5 tracks.
Yeah.
5 tracks.
Crossroads, Robert Johnson track, which Eric would again record with Cream later on. Yeah. One of his favorites. Well, so you and Eddie Hardin left in 68. We agreed around 68.
But mind you, I don't want to jump ahead of us, but I didn't leave for long.
Okay.
And neither did Eddie. We came back into the fold again after about 2 years.
Okay.
And I did things with Spencer in Germany and so on. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually stayed, apart from that little leaving in 1968, whatever it was, and then we got Hardin York started, so that was running and going well. Actually, we had 3 gold albums with Hardin York that really grew up. Anyway, so I was with Spencer actually. I can't say till the day he died, but right up until just a short time before the end, when he got really ill and couldn't go out on the road anymore. But I did years and years with him, playing when he played over. He played a lot in Germany because very, very popular in Germany, and I played with him then, of course, and it was we just kept it all going, and so I've always felt that I stayed with him pretty well all the way through. We had a little break in the middle where I got sort of tired of it. And I said, Spencer, I don't really want to do this anymore. We've got Hardin York going now, and I want to give that a chance, you know. So which we did, and it worked out very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you stayed close to the fold, like you said, and friends all those years. So sometimes you just need a little break, like you said, kind of spread your wings a little bit, you know.
Yes, it's surprising how that happens in our business, where people leave and then they come back again, you know, because I always enjoy the Spencer Davis. People used to say, when you go on, whether you go on in my own band or whether I go on with somebody else's band, or whether I go on inside a Spencer Davis group, how can you keep on playing those songs? It's nearly 60, it's 60 years this year.
Mm-hmm.
60 years will be my stage jubilee, as we call it, and that'll be good. Yeah.
Let me ask you this about the longevity and playing the same songs over and over again.
All
those years. Do you ever get tired? Do you ever get tired and say, "Oh"?
No, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Okay, well, good.
That's right. When people say, keep on running night after night after night. So I mean, I say a very glib sort of answer. I say, well, I'm still trying to get it right.
That's good. Well, I think that goes back to your attitude, what you said about earlier on when we talked. You said about pleasing the audience. You know, you're playing for the fans, for the audience. You know, and if that's what they want to hear, you know, that's what it's about. You know. So,
yeah, it is. It is. Give them what they want. You can, of course, making up a program of what you play from night to night is an interesting fact. But I nearly always try to play things. I play the Spencer Davis group. If it's a rock setup I'm in on the stage, we'll do the Spencer Davis songs, the big ones which people like to hear, and that'll be my contribution to the people. But I'll also put in something that I want them to hear.
Right. Yeah.
You have to. Maybe a song or a style of music, whatever that is not in the music so far that night. I'll put something like that in, just so they get a chance to. Because I've found that if you can surprise the people, because the people start off an evening and they're listening and they're looking at you on the stage, and they don't really know what you're going to give them next. And if you give them something which surprises them and they like it, which they often do, I've got a couple of songs which my wife loves me to play, and they're not at all on a rock program. You'd never hear them, but they're sort of little jazzy songs, and usually they get great applause. Yeah. Isn't that right, dear?
It is.
That's right. You know, I've never been a musician, but I disc jockeyed. I DJ'd at a club before. In a similar way, I know there's an art to playing what they're familiar with, the audience, the band, and then interjecting some of the music that you want. So there's definitely an art to keep them interested. You know,
yes, that's right.
Don't lose the audience. Yeah, exactly.
Right. In fact, I used to do with the original Spencer Davis group when we were playing club gigs. At the end of the show, when people are normally doing encores, we used to finish with one of the big hits, of course. Then we'd leave the stage, go into the dressing room, and wait for the thunderous applause, and then we'd come out again. You know, as bands do, you come out and you play another song.
Right.
So what did we play? So I don't know how I introduced this, but I introduced a couple of comedy songs from a well-known comedian, but they were kind of rather corny songs, but they were attractive somehow. And I used to do these songs. Steve used to play the piano, Muff used to play on it, and people loved it. It was something totally different from what had gone before, but they loved it.
Yeah. Well, getting the comedy relief in there, I think that helps too. Keeps the audience, into it and enjoying
You see,
the music.
all bands, there's a lot of comedy goes on backstage behind the scenes with all bands, I think, and because we all of us love to laugh. We like things to be light-hearted. We have a bit of a laugh. I do anyway, and so I think that's it's a good thing, and it happens quite a lot. When I think about some of the bands, I finished up playing with a jazz musician you mentioned in Germany called Helge Schneider. I think you mentioned him before.
Yeah.
Well, Helge is actually known more for being an out-and-out comedian, and a very good one, very intelligent one as well. And but he plays many instruments, and he plays them pretty well. Particularly, his main instruments are guitar and piano, and then all the other instruments which lead off from that. So keyboards and blah blah blah. Hammond organ he plays. He loves to play that. But he's a good comedian as well, and he writes how can I say, comedy novels, if you like, and sells lots of books. He's very successful here and has been for several years. But as I say, he loves to play jazz, and we played together first in a trio in about 2002 or 3. I started to go on the road with him, playing his concert tours, and he'd play at least 100 shows at a time. So in any one year, he'd play at least 100 shows, which is quite a lot,
It is a lot.
And I got to see how he worked professionally, which was very interesting for me, because he's a guy who he would go on the stage and seemingly not have any idea what he was going to do. I think he did it more for effect with us, but whichever way it was, we'd stand on the side of the stage at 8 o'clock when we were due to walk on and get going, and he'd say, "How do I start? How do I start?" What a thing to say. It's wonderful. It's
an icebreaker. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we say, "Well, you mean you've forgotten how you start? This is a disaster," But of course it wasn't.
Ready to
He
happen.
did perfectly well what he was doing, I think. Yeah.
Well,
very nice guy. One of the best people I've ever worked for. Helge Schneider. Yeah.
Is that right? Well, I'm glad that you got together.
I'm telling you all in Texas.
Right. Well, going back to, I wanted to mention Hardin York, the world's smallest big band.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were doing similar territory as what the Nice, Keith Emerson. I think.
You're right.
I think Eddie,
they had one more person.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say that exactly, but with less people. You only had the two, and you were making the same sound, with just two people.
Well, Eddie played bass pedals on the Hammond organ, so he could fill in the part of a bass player.
Yeah.
And so we didn't need the bass, so we could actually do it with two people. It would still sound full enough. The music without a bass line of some sort doesn't sound particularly right, as good as it could be. But with him playing the bass, he was an excellent organ player. The more I listen to it now, after all these years, and now poor chap's gone, but he was a very good organ player, very creative.
Yes, he
and
was.
His solos were, he loved Emerson, by the way. You mentioned Keith Emerson, and Eddie loved Keith. Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of good organ players. one of my great friends who I called, I think it was last night or the night before, was Brian Auger. And Brian's been living for years and years in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to him. I would
Yeah.
Yeah. If you could put in
I'm sure he'd enjoy talking to you.
if you could put in a good word. Right.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to mention from your work with Eddie Hardin. I think my favorite album is Tomorrow Today. Tomorrow Today, the first one. The title track is excellent. I think.
Yes.
I also like 100 Years From Now. It's another one.
Isn't that nice? That is a lovely one. Yeah.
Yes.
100 years from today. Oh.
Listen, everyone is another.
Yeah.
Yeah. You remember these?
Yeah, I do.
All I See Is You.
Yeah.
Great. And then Mulberry Place. So those are my top picks, I think.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'm glad you like them. Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice.
I used to like one called which was on extension 345, which not the next one, I think, the next album after Tomorrow Today. And that one had really some bits of orchestration. They had a few strings on it, some brass, on some tracks, not all. And we did one called Cowboy, where it was a story. Eddie wrote this story song, as it were, about a cowboy riding lonely across the plains. And then the Indians attack, and then the cavalry comes to save the wagon train, and all the cliches from Western movies. But he put in lovely backgrounds, like we both of us enjoyed very much epic films.
Yeah.
And the music of epic films, which was often really exciting. And so with Cowboy I thought that was a good piece. Yeah.
Well, you guys over there really had a fascination with the Western movies as kids growing up, going to watch the matinees, the movie houses, watching
that.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you reminded me of a good story. We were all with a Spencer Davis group maybe in the 70s or even 80s. We were, it would be 70s, I think. Yeah, 70s. And we were up in the wilds of Sweden, up in one of those towns which has a name like Uppsala, or, funny names in Swedish. And so there we were with the band, and we had an afternoon off before we needed to go to the theatre to play. And what was showing at the local cinema was the Alamo, John Wayne's Alamo.
John Wayne, yeah.
Spectacular, wonderful music.
Yeah.
And we had the night before, we'd been in, I think it was in a big city called Stockholm, and we'd been walking around the town, and we'd passed a gun shop selling guns and whatever. And in the window, they were selling these, what were in fact starting pistols. So in other words, they made a bang, but you couldn't kill anybody with them because the barrels were blocked off. But they made a big noise, and smoke and flame came out. So we thought, we've got to get some of these, you see, because it seemed to be open to people just going off the street and buy them. I don't think it would happen now. So we went in, and we all bought these guns. I've still got mine.
Is that right?
And so we bear in mind we've got these guns in the hotel, all of us. Let's go and see the Alamo, and let's take the guns with us. When I think about this story now, with all that's happened with terrorists and everything, goodness me. So there we are, and there's about half a dozen old age pensioners sitting in there on the cheap seats. Yeah. The movie's going on, and suddenly a battle breaks out, and Santa Anna's Mexican army comes over the hill, and the defenders awaiting in the fort, and suddenly all hell breaks loose. There's cannons firing and rifles and God knows what. And then we get the guns out and start shooting back at the screen, and the poor old age pensioners.
Did anybody have a heart attack?
Hiding under the seats, yeah.
Oh
But I
man.
think we did the right thing, because after we'd done that and we thought of the consequences of the Swedish police arriving,
Yeah.
and us spending the night in jail, so we ran out of one of the side doors of the cinema and disappeared into the town, which I think was a wise move.
Yeah. Well, that was just the first use of sense around sound, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In a theater.
I think, yeah, if you were sitting in front of us, the effect must have been glorious. You know, gunfire from the back, gunfire from the front.
They've got us surrounded. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Those are great stories like that. The well, why were you do you think you and Eddie were so popular in Germany?
I think in many cases it was, first of all, we were different. People had never seen anything like us before. Two people walk on the stage with the Hammond organ and the drum set. And then we sit down and we begin to play. And we used to play on those club gigs. We sometimes used to play one set before the interval was 2 hours.
Yeah.
Then we take a break and come back and do it all again. Not the same songs, but and so I think that was it. And then we had the great good fortune in 1969, when we started to get on the road. We played a pop festival in a town called Essen, which is right in the middle of Germany. It's an industrial town. There's a lot of people around there, and it was in the town hall, the Stadthalle, which was just a big hall which you could use for expositions and expeditions and so on and so forth. And all kinds of bands were on there. It was just a procession of groups all day for about 2 or 3 days, actually. Anyway, so we're due to go on, and we're due to go on at 6 o'clock in the evening. Not a great time. It's before the evening times got really heated up, where the big bands are coming on about 10 o'clock. But it was still good, and there were still, I think the Nice were on that show, and they were either just before us or just after us. And so we go on as Hardin York, and we start to play, and we got great applause from the first number, because people are surprised by what sort of a sound we can make just between the two of us. That was the marvel. It was just two people on that stage, but we made a big sound, you know, Eddie's bass line, everything was really great. And what happened was that there were, I think, 5,000 people inside the hall, and there was another 5,000 people outside trying to get in, but weren't allowed in. It was full. And the officials were saying, can't come in, can't come in. And they're saying, yeah, but we want to see the show. You know, it's a great show, greatest show we've ever had in Germany, and we want to get in and see it. So they burst through the doors. They'd got barriers up on the doors, you know, the iron bars. And this crowd just put so much pressure on these doors. They actually broke all the doors in, which were wood and glass. But they caved in, you know, the doors just caved in. So they either climbed over the iron barrier or they went underneath it, you know. So, but they got in. That was the thing. They got in. So now they're crowding into the hall. The people who are already in the hall saying, wait a minute, why are you pushing me around? I had a nice place to watch the show from here. And why are you doing it? Yeah, well, I'm trying to. So a fight started out all over the hall. And this would have been maybe an hour before we went on stage that this fighting broke out. It was still going on to a certain extent when we went on the stage, but by then things had changed a bit, because when the fights broke out, somebody had obviously phoned the police. So there were a lot of police in there anyway, but now suddenly there was 2 or 3 times more the police, and they came pouring in, and then they started having a fight, but they got it calmed down. By the time we went on the stage, it wasn't too bad, but there was a lot more people in there.
Yeah.
And the television news had been informed that there was this riot going on, rock and roll riot. Oh, great. So the television news, which was about half an hour away in Cologne, and they said, quick, get the cars and the cameras over there. We've got to film this rock and roll riot. So they come over, get the cameras out, already get in, let's see what's happening. Well, there wasn't too much happening with the crowd by then. The police had already calmed them down. So what could they do? They could go and see, well, who's playing music on the stage? What are all these people listening to?
Mhm.
And it's us.
Yeah.
So we're suddenly there on national news. And the reporter is giving a report. Well, there was so many thousands of people rioting, but now it's quietened down a bit thanks to the Essen police force. Great voice. And people are now happily listening to, what's the name of this band? Oh yeah, Hardin York. I mean, talk about publicity.
I was going to say, yeah, I was going to
Which
say.
wasn't that known. So everybody's watching the evening news. People do. Over here they do in Germany and in England. People love that evening news. That's
Right.
a hot.
Isn't there something that inadvertently?
Guys talking, and in the background you can hear us playing, and we're on actually playing. So it was one of the best bits of promotion we could have had.
There you go, and it wasn't planned. It's just the riot. Just
That was a real riot. Yeah, I've seen a few of them since then, and sometimes they're not funny.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, I was with Eddie again, and there was a riot in the place because there was an artist from some years ago called Edgar Broughton.
Right, Edgar Broughton.
Funny enough, he had it was a trio that he had, and he had songs like "Out Demons Out," with all this black magic stuff. It was before Black Sabbath, for example.
Yes, I believe he was on the Harvest label too. Harvest.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
that's right. And what his thing was, he'd go on the stage and say, "I think it's unfair that you should have to pay to listen to music. Music is for everybody, and it should all be free." With him backstage thinking, all be free? We're supposed to be trying to make a living doing this. What gives you the permission to go out talking like this? But by then he'd already stirred them up. And he said, yeah, out, demons out. Let music be free. Let it all be free. And he's shouting at the audience like this, and they all pick it up. Out, demons out. Yeah, let it all be free. So we're stuck on the stage, and the people are saying, well, we're not paying for this. Let's go and get the money back.
It's like you tell him, Edgar, you can shoot yourself in the foot, but don't shoot us in the feet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
But there was this hippie sort of movement that everything could be free.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Who pays for it in the first place?
There you go. You're not doing this for free. People have to make a living. Wow. What a concept. What an idea. Well,
the nice thing is you never hear from him nowadays. I've never heard of Edgar Broughton for years.
Right. Maybe he'll watch this. What about the opening for Deep Purple? You became friends with John Lord and Ian Pace.
Yes, and that was, of course, very nice because that became a really long-lasting friendship.
Yeah,
and we were good friends up until the day he died.
Yeah,
and it was very sad that he died. Very sad that he got that particular dreadful cancer. The one which nobody gets away from.
Right.
And but he was a wonderful person. Yeah. A great musician, of course, for a start, as we all know. and never to be forgotten. I'm doing a concert in Munich, not as a musician, funnily enough, but as a presenter of the concert here in a Munich concert hall, where in the same concert hall in 1974, 50 years ago, we did one of John's classical concerts. It was from the record called Windows.
Oh,
Windows and Continue was one of John's Rock Meets Classic records.
right. Rock meets classic. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and a young group who I know have got together with a symphony orchestra, and they're preparing and rehearsing this performance of that music, concerto for rock group and orchestra. Yeah.
Oh, well, that will be quite interesting and rewarding, I'm sure.
Yes, I mean, I'll just be there as a link to the past in terms of the fact that John and I were friends. We played that music ourselves on stage, and my friendship with Ian Pace is actually of the same length. And later on, during the Superdrumming times, Ian was kind enough to come and be a guest on that show, which was nice. In fact, he did it twice. He was the only one who did it twice, I think. Yeah.
Right?
But let's say the friendships that I've had over the years have all been truly long-lasting friendships. In other words, they weren't just you get together with somebody on a concert or on a tour or something, and you become good pals and you enjoy a good laugh and so on. And then at the end of it, it's cheerio. Maybe I'll see you again in the future. And mostly you don't see them. Right. With those friendships, with the Purples, that has remained so. Also, I had a friendship. I'm pretty sure it lasted as well. It certainly did, with Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones, because Charlie and I got on very well together because we're both jazzers. We're both anorexs.
There we go.
There we go again. Number 13.
We should see a dollar sign or something every time we say that word. We get paid. We get paid, right?
Yeah.
Well, a precursor to the Superdrumming, you started your own percussion band.
Yes.
And I noticed that one of my favorite drummers, as well as I enjoy his music and his band, Steve Hartley, guest drumming. Yeah.
That's right.
I've got a couple of his albums, and
when I had that so-called percussion band, Pete York percussion band, Ian was on drums, I was on drums, Keith Hartley was on drums, and also Roy Dyke from Ashton, Gardner and Dyke.
Yeah.
He played another set of drums, and we had drum routines worked out between us. And we were doing a concert in a sort of big nightclub place in Leicester Square called Bumpers, it was called. And we're all of us there with our 4 drum sets. And there was a set of congas on the stage, conga drums. And suddenly through the door comes Keith Moon. So he wants to join in. And I thought, oh no, please. Because we had rehearsed all our drum routine. We had some spectacular drum routines worked out for the 4 of us, but we had rehearsed them. We actually knew what we were going to do. Keith had no idea what we were going to do. So, but he just jumped on the stage and took over one of the drum sets and started bashing away. But I wish I had a recording of that, actually.
Had he been drinking before that?
I would say so, yeah. Just a few small sherries. Yeah.
Oh, I've heard stories. Yes, I have. Well, I want to hear about this, about Bali Agung in 1965, German TV special. My wife is from Jakarta, Indonesia, so that's special to me. We went to Bali several years ago.
We weren't in Jakarta. We were in Bali.
Yeah, Bali. Well, I was going to say she's from Jakarta, but we
Oh,
visited Bali.
right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did that. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
it's lovely. And it
yeah,
was a fascinating experience because I think there was in our gamelan orchestra, you know, the thing that this style or direction of music that they play, they're using like a xylophone thing, and they're using polychromatic music and so on and so forth. Um, but that was fascinating because when I went into it, people said to me, "Well, you'll have to learn to play in 5/4 because lots of their music is in 5/4."
oh, okay.
And I said, "Well, that's not a problem for me. I was brought up with Dave Brubeck's Take Five. All of
Yeah,
us drummers from that time learned how to play in 5/4, so that's not a problem." Uh, so I thought, well, that's it. I'm on 5/4. So I get there. Oh, first of all, I bought records. I went into HMV's record store on Oxford Street, and they had an international world department. You know, like many good record shops have that nowadays. They're selling records from around the world, from all different countries. You can find examples. African music, this music. For a drummer, it's heaven because you can pick up all these different types of playing, types of drumming.
right.
You know, drumming from Japan, drumming from here, there, and everywhere. It's all wonderful. And so I did that, and I listened to Balinese music for the first time, really.
Mhm.
And I got an idea, some idea of what it was all about, but it was still a little bit daunting for me to listen to this music. All this, it was very fast. So I was trying to find out where's the beat in this. There must be a beat here somewhere, which they're all following. You know, you've got to have that. You've got to have a bass player or a drummer who's playing something straightforward you can all hear. And when I got together with the gamelan orchestra and I started to really listen to them live in the same room, in other words, which happened to be the ballroom of the hotel, back to ballrooms again.
Yeah.
So there they all are, and they start to play, and there were two guys at the back with different size gongs, big gongs, really big wide gongs, and they made such a sound, boom, 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 boom. And I thought, wait a minute, that's where everybody's taking their time from these gongs. There was a high one and a low one, and they would alternate, much like the bass drum and the hi-hat did on a drum set. I thought that's my basis, you know. I'll listen and figure out which one of these is the one, and then I'll have it cracked. So I did, and it did it for me. I just stayed with these guys. You know, I listened very much to what they were doing, and I did all my drumming around their kind of this wonderful tone.
The gongs. Yeah.
You know, it was a great thing to hear. You know, because these gongs were huge. You know, there was one of them was almost as big as I'm tall,
Uh-huh.
which is tall.
Yeah. We were lucky enough to sit and watch one of the Balinese, dances and the music that they played. So it might have been similar to what you're referring to. But
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
we had dancers with us as well, and
okay.
we had the temple dancers doing those dances with us. It was really that's right. We brought that show to Germany, and it toured in Germany with a couple of dancers and also the full orchestra, and we played all this stuff, and we had a smallish group of how can I say straight Western players, let's say, and we knew what we had to play, and we played it and sandwiched it in with what they played, the Balinese, and altogether it worked out very well. And we toured all around Germany with that. It was brought over by the Goethe Institute, which is a culture institute in Germany, which promotes the arts.
Mhm.
It was a very worthwhile thing. It got good critics. People really enjoyed it. And it was really good fun to play. Yeah, I must say.
You think, are there still copies of that show floating around, or do you think on YouTube you?
Yes, you could. What you would look for is the artist who was the conductor and the instigator of this whole thing, and his name was Eberhard Schöner.
Okay.
Eberhard Schöner.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
You'll see his name in my biographies as well on Wikipedia. My association with him, Eberhard Schöner. You'll see his name there as
okay.
part of my life story.
Look
And
that way.
he's made many albums, Eberhard, but some of those that we did in Bali are still available on CD. There's there's, if you can find this, and you might be able to find it, there's a DVD, well, it's a CD and a DVD of, they made out of our visit to Bali, the Bayerische Rundfunk, which is the broadcasting organization for Munich area. They paid for this album to be made and a film to be made. So the film was broadcast on German television, and it was called Bali Agung.
Okay.
So you could try dialing that in, Bali Agung, and just try put it in and see what you get. You should get all the information. Google it in. Yeah.
Yes, I will. Oh, definitely. I will look into that. Well,
because there's also the film that there's also the film that we made, which is very interesting because you'll see us rehearsing with them.
Yeah.
All sorts. It's a lovely film.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit about Olympic Rock and Blues Circus.
Yeah. Well, that happened because a drummer friend of mine, he was also promoting concerts, I suppose, in the Essen area, once again, Essen. And his name was Charlie Eichert. And he came up with this idea of putting a sort of an all-star band together. Now, this was after I'd worked with John Lord on the Saraband and those things that we did together in the mid-70s. So Charlie knew that I could get to John Lord. And he knew that if you were going to do these all-star things, you better have some all-stars. You can't just do it half-hearted. You can't just do it with half stars. You've got to do it with all stars.
Yeah, that's good.
So we put together a band, first of all, which was going to be Brian Auger, Chris Fowler, myself, and then there was a brass section and so and so. But that was about the size of the stars. But three known people like myself and John and Chris Farlow. What did I say? Brian Auger. I said Brian Auger. Yeah, not John at that point. So what happened was that we proposed this tour and everybody said yes, they like to do it. And then Brian's manager said, well, this is fine, but I don't think it's right for Brian. He needs to have more money. Right. So we said, well, we can't pay any more money. We've calculated everything down to the last Deutschmark at that point. And so there isn't any more money there. So, well, in that case, I can't let Brian do it. He was the manager. So, right, that's that. And so I went to John Lord because he was a pal I could always phone up with any little problems I might have. A real friend, in other words. Yeah. And I said, John, I knew he wasn't doing anything at the time. He wasn't busy at the time. So I said, John, how would you like to do an R&B sort of tour with a good brass section and Chris Farlow singing, and me on the drums, and obviously you on the organ. And he said, that sounds fantastic. He said, I've always wanted to do something with Chris, you know, he's one of my favourite singers. And to be together on the road would be terrific. So let's do it. So John agreed to do it. And we went out. The first Olympic Rock and Blues Circus was that lineup with John actually on the keyboards. Yeah.
Where the idea behind Superdrumming, where did that come from? The idea.
Well, I have to say that was my idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew out of something which was suggested to me by a gentleman who became also a very good friend, Michael Maschke. And he was a television director at South German television in Stuttgart.
Okay.
And I'd done a little show for them in the studio with a small group. And at the end of it, we were just talking generally. You know, we'd finished the show, the TV show was over, we were sitting having a coffee. And he said, have you ever thought of doing a drum workshop or a drum lessons or a drum clinic, whatever you like to call it, on TV, you know, regularly, and do a regular spot on TV? I thought, well, this sounds marvelous. Yeah. I said, but I don't think I want to do a drum workshop. It sounds very dry, not very interesting.
Yeah.
And so therefore I said, let me think about it and I see what I can come up with. But thanks for the offer. It sounds wonderful. So I went away and thought about it and came up with the format for what Superdrumming became, which was not just about me, because I don't know everything about drumming by any means. Nobody does. But I thought that I wanted to show the world, you know, on TV, what a drummer does actually, because you see them in bands on TV, you know, whether it's a pop group or whatever it is, and you see the drummer sitting there bashing away. Well, what's he there for apart from making a lot of noise? Well, of course, he's there for very important reasons. First of all, in a group with no conductor, the drummer takes the part of the conductor.
Right.
You know, classical orchestras have conductors who give them the tempo and signal them in and tell them when to do this, that, the other. The drummer's doing that all the time from behind the drum set. He's making little signals to bring people in, and he's setting things up. You know, he'll make a little break just before something is supposed to happen to warn all the others in the band that something is going to happen. So it's, you know, he's preparing everybody for what's coming next. He's also controlling the volume of the whole band, because if the drummer plays very quietly, very, very, very quietly, the whole band has to play quietly, otherwise they can't hear the beat, the tempo, the rhythm.
Right.
So they'll all come down so that they can be with you. And then when you start to come up, whoa, and then they'll all come up as well, and the volume will increase. So it's really, the drummers had a lot of control, which I like the idea of that. I like the idea of having control. I don't think I'm particularly a control freak. Far from it. I'm just waiting to see if I'm laughing.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, it reminds me of another interview I did was with Bob Henrich. You know who Bob Henrich is?
Bob, yeah, lovely.
Yeah, and he was behind that Count Me In, that documentary on drumming, the Netflix movie Count Me In. Yeah, he was the one that was behind that, and that was, you know, similar, I guess, in a way, because they had all those drummers, and they did the circle drumming, you know, where they all sit in that. Yeah, and that kind of stuff. But you've worked with a veritable who's who in drummers over the years, and the Superdrumming series. Are there any drummers that you haven't worked with that you would have liked to, or that you would like to?
Well, when we had Louis Belson on, and Louis Belson is, in my estimation, one of the top 5 of all time as a drummer. He's very experienced and a great musician he was. I had thought in the very beginning, obviously enough, about trying to get Buddy Rich, who was considered by everybody to be the best drummer of all time. And I didn't do it because, to be honest, at the very beginning, I thought to do what I want to do on the show, which is I also wanted to show how drummers can play outside of their own field of experience, and how interesting that would be is to get, say, a jazz drummer playing country and western, for example. And I thought, if I ask Buddy Rich to play country and western, he's going to kill me because he hates it, So I thought, I don't really want to have to cope with that on the day of filming something, because everything, I knew the timing would be fairly tight. So I got Louis Belson to do it because I'd met him before several times, and I knew he was one of the nicest human beings you could ever meet. He was just really an angel. And so I asked him to do it, and he agreed. And then he said to me, he said, "Do you want me to get Buddy Rich to do it?" Because they were friends.
Oh, okay.
And at that point, it was all organised who was going to do it, and there wasn't time to change anything anyway. So I said, well, let's just leave it as it is for the moment. I might ask Buddy to do something that he wouldn't like, and then there'd be problems and blah blah. Because we had everything planned, what they should all do. And I said, we've got a good lineup of drummers. We had a great lineup of drummers, as you've seen, whatever it is you're reading there. Is it Wikipedia?
Right. Oh, and your website. Your website is
okay. Yeah. So that was it, and we did the first series, and it was very successful, very well received. And then they wanted us to do another series the following year, which we did, and we were able to increase everything a little bit in the way it looked, in how much money we spent on each episode of the show, and so on. So we really did get to improve as we went along, because we then got a third series, which was terrific. So altogether, as far as America's series are concerned, in America, you usually do far more programs in a series, like 13 or so. Well, we were only doing 6, but in the 3 years, we obviously did 18 programs, 18 half hours, which is 9 hours of all about drums. But also very important, I asked for in the beginning, I said, we have to have a band playing. I don't want to be just doing this drums all the time. People will be switching off. I don't see any more of this. So I said, we've got to have music, and the music we play will be acceptable for people. So we'll have some hits in there, some music everybody knows. Once again, we'll have a few things in there that people don't know, but when we play them, they'll probably enjoy it, which I hope they will. And so that's the way we built it all up. And by the end of the third series, I must say I was very happy with the way the whole thing looked. The production was terrific. And we were telling little stories along the way, and really making it entertaining, which, as we said at the beginning, entertainment,
Nice that it grew and to see it, the seeds of it, coming to fruition. And like you said, when you first had the idea, and just to see it, it's like your baby, to see it growing like that.
It was.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. I could have gone on with it, but at the television station, they suddenly had a complete turnaround in their people who were working there, and our production team was disbanded. The head of the production team went into retirement, so he disappeared into his old age, which he well deserved.
Yeah.
And so it changed. And they told me, they said, I'm sorry, we're not doing any more live music. We're only going to do news and sports. That's it.
Yeah.
From that particular station. And that was a station where I had proved myself with Superdrumming.
Yeah.
So that was a station which would probably have gone on to do more.
Right.
But it had a good run, and
Right.
as time goes on, the people who got it and bought it on videotape and DVD, and I meet lots of drummers all the time who say, "Oh, we thought your super drumming was terrific," you know. So that's very gratifying, and that's sort of good enough for me in a way. I'm not worried that it didn't. It would have been nice if it could have gone on, and I had plenty of ideas, but it didn't, and so there it remains a valuable gem in the history of
There you go.
history of music videos. Yeah,
You can look back on that and smile, you know, and
yeah,
remembering those times. Well,
yeah.
I wanted to hear, speaking of TV, a couple of other things. Wanted to hear about your forays into creating a show for TV. First, the cartoon film Dracula Jr.
Oh, Dracula Jr.
from 1986.
Oh, great. Well, this came about once again from the same good friend at the South German television. He said they just signed a cartoonist, and this cartoonist they thought was very talented, and he had been working on Asterix and Obelix, which is cartoon characters famous here in Germany. I think they probably made it across the Atlantic and got onto US TV at some point. It's about two Roman soldiers, a big fat one and a little one.
Yeah.
And it was well drawn, well painted, and so on, and well made thing. And they wanted to sign this guy up and get him doing stuff in Germany, get him on German TV. So, as I say, he was an artist, but he didn't have any story ideas. So they asked me whether I'd come up with story ideas. And I had done this kind of script writing before. And so I said, yes, I had it. And I'd written comedy for TV as well. And although I forgot to tell you this, there was a time when I was back in England when I, what was I going to say? I'll be with you in a minute. It's just a brain fog comes over.
We call it a brain fart. Brain fart.
Yeah, I had a friend who worked for ATV, which was a big television organization.
Yeah.
And it was just before the Monty Pythons came together. Okay. And he said to me, "Do you want to do some comedy script writing for us, you see?" And I said, yes. He said, "Well, come along to a script meeting." And so I went along to the script meeting. And at the script meeting, there was Michael Palin, John Cleese, Terry Gilliam, Terry Jones. That's just about the lot, who 6 months later became Monty Python's Flying Circus. And I'm sitting around a table with them all, and they're all putting their jokes in, and I'm putting mine in. And you know, I didn't think who they were at that time. They were just guys fresh out of university, you know, very intelligent. And there they were putting jokes in for a TV show. And I'm sitting in the middle of them all. I did sell some of my jokes, actually. They did. Yeah. So I was in good company. Yeah. But then again, I went on, as I say, and started writing Dracula Jr. And in the original version, the original script version, it's running a bit long. They cut down the story, so it's a bit too long. The time slot we have is only 20 minutes, and you've written 30 minutes. So we have to get it down to 20 minutes. So, which we did, in fact. And there were 5 or 6 songs in it. I wrote 6 songs to be in it, but only 4 of them made it into the final version. It was a funny little thing. It's a funny little thing. I don't know if you've ever seen it, whether it's ever appeared in America.
Okay. I don't think so. That's another one I'm gonna look up. You know, when you were talking about that writing comedy, in the early Monty Python before they become Monty Python. I was thinking about the Goon Show. Remember the Goon Show?
Oh yeah,
Oh
wonderful.
yeah, with Peter Sellers. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
yeah
Well,
that
I know
early.
there's a lot of fans in America of the
Uh,
Good Show.
yeah.
I keep meeting musicians,
Uh,
especially musicians, and they
yeah.
love it because
Yeah.
there's something about the humor that
Right.
it's just great.
We
Yeah,
we love English humor over here.
yeah,
I was a big fan of Monty Python. We just eat that stuff up.
yeah.
Um, well,
There's another.
go ahead.
By the way, if I may suggest something off the wall.
Hmm.
Uh, Michael Palin
Yeah.
and Terry Jones made
Uh,
a series outside of Monty Python,
mhm.
a different idea because every episode, every half hour, was a story. And it was based, the whole series was based on the sort of stories that young boys used to read back maybe even before the Second World War, sort of boys' own stories. In other words, the stories were for adventurous boys. And
Yeah.
this television series that Palin and Terry Jones wrote was called Ripping Yarns.
Ripping yarns. Yes. Yes.
And if you've heard of that and you haven't
Yeah.
seen it, you
Yes.
really have to see it.
Yes.
It's
Ripping yarns.
tremendous.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yes, I have. Oh yeah. Well, the other one I want to ask about, and this will be pretty much, I don't think I have any other questions kind of coming to a close, was Via Fantastica.
Oh, yes. Well, this was a pet thing really for me to do because, first of all, it meant that I actually could get on TV with actually a jazz group. And the Villa Fantastica came from Michael Mashker and I were just playing around with. We both loved old films and old comedy, all this nostalgia stuff. And he said, um, it was his idea. The old house was his idea. Have you seen any of these?
No,
Have you
no,
seen it?
I haven't seen
Ah,
any.
shame. Yeah. Um, well, it was the idea was when you saw the titles, and
Mhm.
it said Villa Fantastica. There was a beautiful big villa, a proper. It was actually a model building. It was a lovely house with a little garden in the front and railings and a gateway and a lovely big doorway, and then rooms and rooms. And this was the Villa Fantastica, and this was like a magical fantasy place where you could walk into it. And as you walked in, it was actually a model. This model was about 5 feet high,
Okay.
the
Oh,
house itself, and it had different rooms in it. But as soon as the camera went in through the front door, then you were into filming inside the interior of a big old house. And what you found as you were going through were little things which were clues as to the film clip you were about to see. So if
oh,
you saw a hat stand and two bowler hats, it was obviously one bigger than the other. It was obviously going to be Laurel and Hardy.
yes.
So there were this sort of little clues. And as we're going through the house, that you can hear music playing. Sometimes it's old music. Sometimes it was us in the band playing old music, but playing it now, so to speak. Once again, I was able to choose the band, and I chose, of course, some very good friends who were tremendous jazz swing players, and Brian Auger was on the piano, incidentally. But there was a guy called Dick Morrissey on the saxophone. You might have heard of him.
Yes.
Another friend called Roy Williams on the trombone, and a bass player called Harvey Weston. And this was a dream band for me because they played so beautifully, and they required very little rehearsal to play music and play it really beautifully together. So they could do their own arrangements almost. So I'd say, okay, guys, we're going to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Oh yeah, okay. What key shall we play this in? Oh, something A flat, right? Yeah. And then they discuss it in about 5 minutes. They say, okay, you want to try it? Yeah, okay, let's try it. I count it in, and they play it, and they play it beautifully. First off, this is where the real musicians are, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
play it just gorgeously. Gorgeously, that's not a word.
Oh, we'll make it a word, okay?
Yeah, that's make
It's okay.
it's now officially a word.
Okay,
They're really
gorgeously.
fantastic. I'm very happy. I have film of it, um, and Michael Mashka, my friend, has also got copies of everything. But we never got things that we made a music special out of music which we've recorded during the series with the picture as well. So it looks gorgeous. We're all in costume. They dressed us all, which fitted with things to do with the music. By the last series, we had another singer with us called Zoot Money, keyboard player as well.
Loot
Yeah.
money.
And we had a girl singer with us, a really great lady from the States called Maria Moldauer. You remember Midnight at the Oasis?
Midnight at the Oasis, yeah, yes.
Well, that
Right.
was Maria, and she was absolutely great for it, perfect. And I have a tape of that, of us all doing the music and the songs. But unfortunately, I never could find a DVD company that would want to put it out. It was a little bit too limited. The music itself, those old standards from years and years ago, and it probably wouldn't have sold very much at all. And of course, nowadays, particularly nowadays, everybody thinks, oh, well, it's a lovely project, but how much can we sell?
Right, exactly.
Unfortunately, that's the way it is. It's what the market would be.
Yeah.
And you can get away with doing albums of standards if you're Rod Stewart, for example.
I was just thinking, yeah, yeah.
Because he's a rock icon, and he will sell whatever it is he's doing, pretty much.
Yeah.
And therefore he could sell when he started doing all the old Great American Songbook. People bought it because they thought, well, this is going to be good, the Great American Songbook plus Rod Stewart, and he did it very well. I have to say, I think he did it well. Yeah.
Yeah, I do appreciate it, Pete. Thank you for your time and for recalling and sharing all those stories. Some of those humorous ones too. I know the people watching this are gonna get a chuckle out of.
I hope so. That's really is very important, I think. For me, I love people who can entertain me, and I love to entertain other people if I can.
Well, thank you again, Pete. And once I get this edited a little bit, I'll send you a copy.
Yeah,
and
sure.
you can post it on your, wherever you want to on your website.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do.
exactly. Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
And it will also be on my YouTube channel. It will be there
oh,
too.
great. Yes.
That's
Good.
see what kind of reactions and responses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Pleasure,
Again,
really.